Hi, everyone. It is so great to be with you again. This is the coolest crowd on the planet as far as I'm concerned. And you all are so important. I really, as Bernadine said, my work is to support you because I believe with a passion in 21st century learning and teaching. I believe that young people need to be supported in their use, and they need to be respected for their use of social media. And so here we are. I'm going to talk a little bit about myth busting and what the myths are. And the reason why I'm doing a talk, a boring old presentation and talk, is it seems like there's just so much information to present, and this is the only way I know how to do it right now. I need your help in presenting it in a more interesting way. So net safety as we know it is obsolete. I said this almost a year ago at the Googleplex when I was asked to talk about this. And here are some of the properties of the old kind of net safety. One size fits all, based on fear and myth and hype. And it had sort of two parts. It was 1.0 was based largely on crime and adult content, the fear of those things. And 2.0 was more, just sort of added the peer-related harm, cyberbullying and harassment into the mix. But in both cases, young people were always seen as potential victims. And I don't think they themselves want to be seen that way. And technology was always perceived as both the problem and the potential solution. This was just a very benighted approach to youth safety. Social media, it was highly suspect and really still is, and the result is that the very beneficiaries, children, just stop even listening to us and tune us out because all of this is completely irrelevant to their experience. And so one of the concerns that some of us have had about the impact of this approach to safety is this learning gap that Will Richardson has talked about, the decoupling of education and school, the irrelevance of education to young people who are doing so much learning outside of school, in video games, in virtual worlds, in all sorts of places, in social networking sites, everything from the informal learning of social development to, as the Digital Youth Project calls it, messing around and geeking out. So this is a frustration for educators who want to move forward, for schools that want to move forward into the actual 21st century and stop operating completely along the lines of the 19th century model. It's a total missed opportunity for students. And we have this decrease in the competitiveness of American education. So what do we know about and from the social media research? The people who are telling us about how young people actually do use social media. And, that was kicked off by the MacArthur Foundation over 3 years ago, that process called the Digital Youth Project at both Berkeley and USC, and it involved more than 24 researchers, and they talked with young people in their family settings, in after-school programs, and at school. So a really key set of facts show us that online socializing reflects real life. This is key because data that show that 82%, and I think this is conservative, of 14 to 17-year-olds are on the social web now, and 91%, the vast majority, use social sites to stay in touch with their friends at school. The environment is school, not Facebook, not World of Warcraft. It's not media, and it's not technology. The relevant environment is school. This is from Sonia Livingston in the UK.
Before you do this slide, I want you to say what you said again, because I think it's really important to say that the environment is school, and how important that is for us to make that point in the conversation rather than Facebook. So.
Yeah, this is what we all really need to be talking about, and you all, because you get it, are so important to this national conversation. It's at a very watershed point right now, and I'll explain that in a moment, but it's because a major government department, the Federal Communications Commission, has just come out with a major policy speech and is trying to take a leadership role that is very positive and constructive and respectful of youth and media. So that's why we have to understand that the internet, that the social web, social media, 21st century learning and technology tools are not add-ons to their experience. They're part of their lives. They move freely among devices and online and offline. They don't make the distinction that we make as mass media natives. And so we really have to understand that the environment that we're talking about here is the same environment you all have been working in for so long, and that's school. I just wanted to read you something that Sonia said. She is one of my gurus, and she's at the London School of Economics. She says that all the digital native hype that we've heard, which Henry Jenkins objects to and which the social media researchers are showing us is really becoming kind of hype. She suggests that new media, that the hype suggests that new media brought into being a whole new species, a youth transformed, qualitatively distinct from anything that has gone before, an alien life form whose habits it is our task to understand. It's not an alien life form. It's just what's going on at home and school. So I better keep moving here. So what are they doing in there? Well, I think you all know this instinctively because it's what they're doing in real life. They are doing all sorts of interesting child development and adolescent development activities. They're doing the risk assessment that's a primary task of adolescent development. They are keeping in touch with their friends. They're exploring identity. They're producing. They're sharing and creating music. They're discussing their interests. And they're hanging out. And then, of course, besides the good and normative and positive things, they're also doing negative and neutral things, things that could get them into trouble. But as Sonia and other researchers show, both in the youth risk field and the social media field, this could go right or wrong, these activities. The really negative stuff, harassing and bullying, we'll get to more. Sometimes they just pull pranks or make a joke that can have a profound effect on another child. And that used to happen in real life, but it's definitely happening online as well. So what the Digital Youth Project researchers are showing us is that there's really two kinds of social networking, and they have a sort of a taxonomy of that whole that whole paradigm too that they've shared with us. But these two types are friendship-driven and interest-driven. And all of society seems to have focused on friendship-driven. And if it's playful, if it's social, if it's recreational, somehow or another, mass media natives, many people in my generation, have seen it as a waste of time. And this is one of the myths that we need to overcome. There was a major study done by the Kaiser Family Foundation and unveiled in Washington just a few weeks ago. But riddled throughout the entire study were the words consume and consumption. That is the context of a mass media native. That is what media used to be to us. We were consumers of media. Children don't consume media. They play with it, they produce it, they interact with it, they experiment with it, they do all kinds of interesting things with media. And we have to factor that into this conversation about online safety. So I just love what James Paul G. says about the interest-driven part of online community for youth. I call it the guild effect, based on what I've learned from my friends in your field who are engaged in World of Warcraft. And I think I sort of have a stealth guild with you guys. But the guild effect is about, it's purposeful and focus. And I think it's also protective because it lends itself to a form of community self-regulation, a collective understanding of social norms. And that's very protective of the participants. But what G says, I'll just read it for you because I think it's profound and important. We're growing a bunch of young people who see what they do as social and collaborative and as part of joining communities, much more than even Gen Xers and definitely baby boomers. They function quite naturally in teams where everybody is an expert in something, but they know how to integrate their expertise with everybody else's. And they know how to understand the other person's expertise so they can pull off an action together in a complicated world. And I think that's important because, you know, if you sort of zoom in on complicated world, it's not getting any simpler, and we are exposed to so much that they have developed naturally, I think, in many ways, and with guidance from people like you, strategies for dealing with that complexity. So what am I talking about here? I'm talking about what we at Connect Safely call Online Safety 3.0. And here are its properties. It's research-based, not fear-based. Fact, not myth-based. It's flexible and layered. The way young people use media is highly individual. We can't possibly throw one-size-fits-all messaging at it. It's respectful of youth agency. I gave a keynote here in Utah to a huge conference of educators, and I was kind of surprised that some of them really thought that we should not be respectful of youth agency, that that was sort of a dangerous thing. But if we're not respectful, then we can't appeal to them as stakeholders in their own well-being online. And they have to be stakeholders because they're producers. And it has to be positive and empowering. It's not safety from just bad stuff. It's for full constructive engagement in an increasingly participatory society. We are preparing them, and they are preparing themselves for a highly, as Henry Jenkins at USC says, a highly participatory environment. So that's what Online Safety 3.0 is, and I wanted to tell you to think about playgrounds, which is an idea that I got from Barry Joseph at Global Kids. So I won't show you the picture of the playground that I have, but I'll just read you what he said. He said, what makes a playground safe? Recreational equipment that are not broken, for example. Barriers to keep out drug dealers or predatory adults. Authority figures to police the space. Is that what we want for our children's playgrounds? Or do we want them to have fun? Do we want physical and social stimulation and development? Do we want them to have an enriching time? That's what playgrounds are for. And oh, by the way, yeah, they should be safe, but its safety is for something. It's not to stop bad stuff only. But there are some things about technology that change the equation. And I get a lot of this from Dana Boyd, who packaged it all very nicely. And these are elements that you all are very familiar with. We all are. Persistence and searchability, replicability, copy and paste, you know, everything from copy and paste digital footprints and photos and text to plagiarism and just all kinds of replicability going on. And then scalability, a high potential visibility and invisible audiences and blurring of public and private. Dana just gave a keynote at South by Southwest about how privacy is no longer about being public versus being private. It's about being able to control your data, control your reputation, be your own spin doctor, be your own political consultant. That's where we're headed. That's what we have to help our children with. And then I would add something that Dana didn't talk about quite as much, and that's something, again, that we're all familiar with, disinhibition. And so we have to help our children understand that those are human beings with feelings behind the avatars and the text messages and the comments and profiles, that this is community too, and we're all in this together. And so because I didn't want people to think that it was one size fits all, I figured, well, I better come up with kind of a taxonomy of online safety. that there's a lot more going on just with online safety than protecting children from predators. And if we look at it this way, we can really think more in terms of rights and freedoms that children have, right? Freedom from physical harm, yes, but freedom from social cruelty and harassment, and exposure to potentially disturbing material, psychological safety, reputational and legal safety, freedom from unwanted social, academic, professional, and legal consequences that could affect you for a lifetime. And then identity, property, and community safety, freedom from theft of identity and physical property as well as intellectual property. So let's think in terms of rights and freedoms rather than dangers and risks all the time. And, you know, sort of back to that idea that this isn't sort of an alien life form that we're talking about, but rather a mirror of all of human life, especially to young people. Then when we're talking about child and adolescent development, we're talking about a whole lot of kinds of expertise. The users themselves, their parents, their teachers, counselors and psychologists, pediatricians, social workers, and these marvelous risk prevention specialists I'm in a discussion list with who have taught me so much about the need to map disease prevention, the need to map cyberbullying and online risk prevention to disease prevention. And I'll get to that in a second. And we also need law enforcement in there. But police and law enforcement are experts in crime and criminal behavior. And what we're talking about is adolescent life. And so crime is only a tiny piece of this discussion. But it kind of feels like it's owned the space for probably about a decade. And that's what I'm seeing is beginning to change.
And
okay.
I'm going to stop you there because
please.
One of the things that you feel is influencing this is that out of all the agencies, nationally, federally, statewide, what's the agency that's taken the most lead in this territory so far? And you have a question on the screen. I didn't have 5 choices, so they can go ahead and vote while you talk about that. But the agency that has sort of been out in front and sort of taking over where people are at right now with thinking about policies.
Yeah. Well, you know, for a long time we sort of had a vacuum. Schools were looking for guidance on what to do with online safety, and they didn't know who to call, so they would call the local police force, right? And we also, at the national level, we have the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And internationally, what we've seen is that the very beginning of this field was always dealing with child pornography, the most heinous and egregious form of online predation. And so the discussion has kind of come out of that very dark, very negative, traumatizing space, traumatizing even for the police officers, especially for the police officers who have been involved in it. And I think in a way, what we're kind of dealing with in this field is post-traumatic stress disorder. Having that sort of inform or own the discussion is just not healthy, and it's really bad for kids. So, what do you think? What do you think is the answer? Anybody?
Whoops,
well,
I'm sorry,
I don't want to
typing again, but let's stay on that screen. And if you voted over here to the right, you can see most people thought it was about 1 in 20, at least the people who voted. Is there anyone in the group who thinks it's over half?
Oh, God, I hope not.
Okay, go ahead with the results. But I think this question is important because perception starts to be reality. Perception starts to be the space that we make policies from, that we make personal decisions for ourselves, for our families, for our kids, for our schools. So we're not going to, the results are coming up behind us. There is a slide share, but I think it'll be more interesting for you to stay with tonight's conversation, your choice. On how that works. But go ahead with the results on this since we've gotten a little bit of information from the group.
Well, back in 2000, 2000, the study said 1 in 5, right? And then in 2006, it actually had gone down. It was 1 in 7, but it really is a trick question And I'll explain why. There has never been a study on how much children are solicited by predators. But look at that headline. And Bernadine, you're right. It does kind of become a reality, a sort of alternate reality that people believe in. And I think that you are experiencing this reality in your schools. And that's the really sad thing. I was talking with Peggy last fall about how afraid parents are. And I was talking with somebody else who said that children are as afraid of the internet as their parents are now. And that's a great tragedy. So here's what the surveys really said. And this is kind of interesting. 39% of the solicitations, and this was sexual solicitations, 39% were from fellow teens, 43% young adults, only 18% ages 26 and up. So only 3% of the 1 in 7 solicitations were aggressive. And the definition of aggressive is asking to meet in real life, calling on the phone, or sending mail, money, or gifts. And only a third of the 3% were adult to teen solicitations that were aggressive. So, in other words, 1%, not the 20% the headline said, only 1% were aggressive adult to teen solicitations. It's still too many, but it's tiny by comparison, comparing to the headlines. So has the growth in young people's use of the internet correlated with a rise in sexual abuse against children? Well, actually, no. This is from the Crimes Against Children Research Center, which got it from FBI data. So from 1990 to 2005, the period of time that the web was born and grew most rapidly, there was a 51% decline in overall child sexual exploitation. So, and the trend is continuing too, according to the latest FBI figures. David Finkelhor, the director of the Crimes Against Children Research Center, just told our discussion list that overall crime dropped, all violent crime dropped too. The rape rate is down almost 10% since 2004, and that's significant because a decline in rape is a decline in child abuse. Bullying and sex abuse, in a separate study, declined 7% and 1.3% respectively, and those are very recent figures. And, if we want to just zoom in on the social web, what we have is David Finkelhor saying there's no evidence predators are stalking or abducting unsuspecting victims based on information posted in social network sites. Have you heard that in any headlines? I think it's a phenomenally contrasting finding to what we're hearing in our society. So here's what we do know. I was on the last task force.
Okay, I'm going to have us pause
here
and just say, let's just have a little conversation on your reaction to what Ann just presented us about the kids' safety and being aggressively, can't remember the words now, but I wanted just to talk about
aggressive solicitations.
Aggressive solicitations. Anyone in the group want to have a little conversation or a question or a voice comment? Because what we're really talking about, kids who are vulnerable to real life
that's right.
scenarios that endanger them are vulnerable in virtual scenarios.
Right, and that's what the last task force really showed, is that not all youth are equally at risk, which is a myth that we're presented with all the time, that it's really kids who are at risk offline, the kids that people have sort of labeled as at-risk youth. And the profile of that child that was shared on Capitol Hill by Finkelhor a couple of years ago, he came up with a fictitious name, Jenna, and Jenna was basically looking for love in all the wrong places. She was going out and looking for problems. She was looking for adventure. She was needing validation and love, the kind of validation and care and love that all children should be getting at home. And so she thinks she's reaching out online. She's maybe falling in love, maybe just taking risks, maybe self-destructive. But what they found in the arrest records is that the child would resist turning over her, the guy who would cross state lines to meet her for sex. This is not violent crime. This is statutory rape, and that's the problem that we have to address. That's where kids need help, and we're seeking the expertise in the real world that can help them not take these risks online. But it never happens. What happens on the internet is the reaching out, and that's what we have to sort of look into more. We have to do more research on that, how to stop that. Predators solicit kids in real life. In fact, the data really shows that the vast majority of predators are people kids know in real life, and the majority of those are relatives, unfortunately. Nancy Willard of the Center for Safe and Responsible Internet Use in Eugene, Oregon, did this look. She took a look at what was going on in Pennsylvania, and what she found was that the rape crisis centers reported about 10,000 cases a year of child or minor sexual exploitation. And over 4 years, the Internet Crimes Task Force had handled 183 net-related cases. So that's over 4 years. If you just double the one-year figure of 20,000 cases in Pennsylvania, compare that to 183 over 4 years of Internet-related, that's what we're talking about here. A tiny, tiny percentage of child sexual exploitation cases have anything to do with the Internet. And that number may go up, and that number, any number, is too big, but it's in contrast to what we're hearing. So this is what the latest research is showing, that harassment and cyberbullying is the most salient risk, the one that kids experience most. 2 separate national samples show that about a third of young people experience that. There are a lot of other studies that say a lot more. But this was a really key finding, a revelation in my mind, that a child's psychosocial makeup and environment are better predictors of online risk than any technology the child uses. Cyberbullying defined: willful repeated aggression associated with real life and a power imbalance. None of that is terribly surprising, but I think the reason why the numbers go up in some of these studies is people are talking about everything from sort of mean gossip to serious bullying in text and harassment online. And I think we just have to be a little clearer. But look at that last bullet. That's so important. The environment is school, not the internet, for bullying. So we're really talking about bullying here, not some additional thing.
Video I thought might be useful to show here.
Sure. Yeah.
And I just wanted to tell you the story. We'll watch it. His name's Kinney. And he was interviewed as someone who was bullied at school and what it was like for him. He was bullied in such a way that he became silent and mute, and he dropped out of school. And only by going back to a school that started creating an environment for kids to be acknowledged, respected, giving kids a voice. It was under the work of Rachel Kessler, who did the Soul, S-O-U-L, of education. But I want you to hear what it was like for him to come into a school in which there was respect. So let's just take a look at Keith for a minute and take a little video break here. Needing to see it
back in my old school, I underwent a lot of teasing. I was picked on a lot. Very rough school. And it just totally crushed my self-esteem and my ability to make friends. That also affected my learning ability because I just gotten so frightened and worried and tired that I just shut down basically learning from school. I didn't even do the schoolwork, but when I came here and when I got into the AIM class, it really helped my self-esteem. It really boosted it up a lot. And I feel a lot more happy and more energetic, so that way I'm able to complete more of my schoolwork.
So great. That's the kind of healing we want to see in every case. And I think that the way that's accomplished, Bernadine, were you talking about in email when you were telling me about this, that there's a program that he was part of, that he participated in?
Can you hear me? It's very simple. Rachel just packaged this. She's out of Boulder. It's called The Soul of Education. But basically, it was about giving kids voice, about acknowledging them, about giving them respect, about giving them a voice in school, and finding ways for kids to appreciate diversity. And, that safe climate accelerated everybody, not just Kinney. The scores went off the chart in student achievement. It was a whole school environment. And we have a lot of examples, not just Rachel's packaging of this, where when respect, and Sylvia Martinez and others will be speaking to this next week around digital citizenship, that the root of this is membership and respect in schools. It is not about whether kids got on the internet and suddenly they're silently bullying. So I just leave that story for you.
Yeah, absolutely. The research is really showing that the only way to go is a whole school approach. And I think what that means, and I think there are probably people here who are more expert on this than me, certainly more than me, but I've written about it a little bit and have tapped into some amazing people at, for example, the Aggression Reduction Center in Massachusetts that's been dealing with a terrible cyberbullying-related suicide and the development of some legislation that I'm a little concerned about. Elizabeth Englander, I was so glad that she was in the discussion about that legislation. And there are people all around the country, including Rosalind Weissman, who talks about developing a culture of dignity. And if schools turn over bullying and sexting incidents reflexively to the police, to law enforcement, and I know that state law requires some schools to do that in some cases, it's extremely unfortunate because kids can be doubly victimized. First, they're victimized by their peers, and then they're victimized by the system. And the solution that law enforcement has come up with is a kind of restorative justice program that moves kids. It takes the incident off the child's record, but the child has to go through a kind of community service / instructional process because they're not the typical juvenile offender. At least they're seen as that. But I think it would really be better if schools worked through situations and turned them into teachable moments. I think it would be much more humane, and it would be a lot easier on children. So one thing that I've been kind of preaching for a long time now, since I first sort of had this revelation in 2007 when I read this in Archives of Pediatrics, that digital citizenship is protective. It's not just empowering, it's protective. It's essential to this equation, to online safety going forward. Because youth who engage in online aggressive behavior online are more than twice as likely to report being victimized. So civil behavior is protective. What does cause risk? Well, this is sort of a little more granular view of that very study. Just aggressive behavior by itself more than doubles risk, but embarrassing others more than quadruples risk. Meeting online with strangers in a whole bunch of places more than triples risk. So you can see that the risk spectrum is covered here, both predation and harassment and bullying, both peer-to-peer and adult-on-child crime, which is kind of interesting. So if we teach children to treat each other well and kindly and civilly and respectfully, we're helping them protect themselves. This I already talked about, really. That the goal is not discipline, it's not punitive. The goal of any school investigation or process is support for the victim first, restoration of order, and community-wide learning. And when you're building a culture of dignity, as Rosalind Weissman puts it, that's what happens. So I really came up with the conclusion that new media literacy and digital citizenship together are net safety 3.0 for the vast majority of young people. And really, media literacy and digital citizenship are melting into each other, right? Because media is, by definition now, behavioral. It's social. And citizenship is online and offline. You can't separate them. We've got to take the digital away, because this is about citizenship in life. And so I sort of attempted a definition. I tried to put it all on one screen. I thought maybe that would simplify things for people a little bit. Critical thinking and ethical choices about the content and impact on oneself, others, and one's community, online and offline, of what one sees, says, and produces with media and technology. Now the question is how to fold literacy, that kind of literacy, the kind that includes, yes, comfort and competency, but also critical thinking about what's outgoing, what one uploads as much as what one downloads and reads and consumes. Critical thinking about one's behavior and its impact on other people. In other words, I think you guys have always taught basic internet safety. And I think school librarians are absolutely key to this process. Critical thinking about sources and content, plagiarism, academic ethics, but now all of that, you just add producing, sharing, posting, uploading. Same with digital citizenship, respect for self and others, respect for one's community, perspective taking, understanding that there are other perspectives, tolerance. Now, all of the same. All the same stuff. I hope we've been teaching it from pre-K through 12 all along. And I love what I heard when I was in Luxembourg for the Safer Internet Forum, an annual forum that the EC puts on. There were something like 30 countries represented. Somebody from the German Ministry of Education said, we need to teach media skills, tech skills, and life skills all throughout their years of school. And that was echoed by the Italian Education Ministry too, and a lot of people from Scandinavia. This is an international understanding. And I just thought, oh, this is so great to hear. I thought, oh my gosh, if we can just bottle that. And so we talked about the whole school approach. Remember I said baseline, basic internet safety. Well, here's where internet safety gets more granular. It gets more research-based, more intelligent, and based on fact, right? So what we need to do, I have learned from my friends in risk prevention, is map online safety to the same structures and the same sort of treatment hierarchy of disease prevention and substance abuse, right? Primary, secondary, and tertiary. What that means is we talked about primary. That's basically media literacy and citizenship, right? Online and offline, on all devices used. Secondary is more specialized or targeted. It's bullying prevention. And it also is situational. It's teachable moments when incidents occur, school fights, nasty cyberbullying incidents. It's teachable moments for everybody. So, and it's both prevention and intervention. So it's prevention when we're talking about empathy training, perspective taking, teaching children those basics of civic engagement and citizenship. But it's also situational, so it's intervention when we need to have a teachable moment. Tertiary is for what society has called at-risk youth, prevention and intervention for youth with established patterns of risk behaviors already disrupting their lives. And for that, we don't train them. We train the experts who help them. We train social workers, mental health care practitioners, psychologists in social media. So talk to your school counselors, get them up to speed in social media so that when they're talking with kids, they're talking intelligently about what's going online as well as offline. And then there's filtering. That's a pretty big online safety issue for schools, right? Well, there's a brand new study out of the UK. It was from Ofsted, the British government's education watchdog. It found that students given a greater degree of freedom to surf the internet at school are less vulnerable to online dangers in the long term. So Ofsted found, it studied 37 different schools that pretty much map to our pre-K through 12. The students are aged 5 through 18. And it rated 5 of the 37 outstanding for both safe conditions and safety instruction. And here's what the 5 outstanding schools had in common. They all used the whole school approach. Ofsted acknowledged that it's very individual, school by school, but they all had a whole school vision with administrators, faculty, tech experts, acceptable use policy, everything working together, and the people working together consciously to improve safety together with the students. And then the other characteristic was that they use managed, not locked down filtering systems. And Ofsted explained in the report that managed means that the schools have fewer inaccessible sites than lockdown systems, and so, quote, require pupils to take responsibility themselves for using new technology safely. Although the 13 schools which used lockdown systems kept their pupils safe while in school, such systems, Ofsted said, were less effective in helping them to learn how to use new technology safely. So I thought that was an impressive finding, and I think maybe we'll start finding this in our schools. Okay? So everybody's got the answer to this, right? Yeah. It's the filter between their ears. It's the very best filter because it is extremely portable and improves with you. But they need your help, and that's like the primary message that I have. Any educator I talk to, any parent I talk to, is the incredibly important role they have in children to develop that filter, because it really is highly protective. And the crucial online safety question going forward, I think, is how do we understand that that's the primary filter? How do we develop it best? Can schools teach media and social literacy with the very media and technologies students find compelling in positive ways? So I just can't resist quoting Henry Jenkins. I love this. He uses that wonderful statement that Peter Parker's shared with Parker, a.k.a. Spider-Man, that great power comes great responsibility. Social media gives all of us a lot of power, but we have really missed the whole question. We missed the whole discussion for an entire decade. We've wasted a whole lot of time. Here's why, Henry says. As a society, we have spent too much time focused on what media are doing to young people and not enough time asking what young people do with media. Rather, we need to embrace an approach based on media ethics, one that empowers young people to take greater responsibility for their own actions, holds them accountable for the choices they make as media producers or as members of online communities. That's in the forward to a new curriculum that's coming. Some of you already know about it. It's a joint effort by the MIT Media Literacy Project, which I think is SC, and the Digital Citizenship Project at the Harvard School of Education. So, summarize. Online safety, as it should be, is respectful, textual, and empowering. But I just wanted to tell you the latest development, and I fit this into an hour. I'm so excited. The latest development, a really positive one in this entire public discussion, was a policy speech by Julius Janikowski, chairman of the FCC. And we all kind of have to watch to see how the FCC does. It's kind of late to the discussion, but tomorrow it's releasing its national broadband plan, pushing for universal broadband. Really great news. But even better news is the very positive approach that the FCC pushing that the 4 pillars of child and family broadband use are digital access, digital literacy, digital citizenship, and digital safety. And that is a really great framework for moving the public discussion forward. My closing thought is just that I am here for you. I learn from you, and I love to disseminate your stories, your questions. So just always contact me. Feel free at Ann@netfamilynews.org or ConnectSafely.org, or direct message me on Twitter. I'm just twitter.com/Ann Collier.
Thank you so much for your willingness to give us your time and be available to us. And there will be a panel this summer at ISTE 2010 with a number of the people in the audience, as well as Ann here, trying to raise awareness and understanding of what the real conversations are. And next week, we're going to work with digital citizenship as an extension of this conversation, but this is the information we needed to get started. So thank you.